What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Also note that I am a certified empowerment coach and president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And also know that Dr. Vibe is the host of Epic Conversations, and also this is the place for Epic Conversations. And we have another new friend on the Dr. Vibe show tonight. And actually, ironically, he's in the same city as I am tonight. Like he's been there all week. And I would have known we could have maybe physically met, but he says he comes up here a few times a year. I'm based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and he's in Mississauga, Ontario, which is western part of the Greater Toronto area. So we are very blessed and highly favored to have Omowale Afrika. He is husband to LaToya, father to Naima and Khairi. Born and raised in Philadelphia, another Philadelphia person on the Dr. Vibe show. I don't know what it is about Philly and Dr. Vibe, but I think if you look at the people we've had on the show, more people from Philadelphia than any other city in the world. And I've been doing this for 10 years. So there's something about Philly. There's something, well, there's a lot of good about Philly. So let me give you a little bit of his background, and then we're going to get right into it. He attended William Penn High School was a graduate of the class of 2001. Shortly after graduating, he enrolled in the Philadelphia Diversity Apprenticeship Program to pursue a career in carpentry. That's interesting. We'll have to get a little bit of background on that. Although the building trades did not provide the opportunity promised by the program, he eventually began to volunteer his time with the Men United for a Better Philadelphia as a community organizer, an advocate against gun violence. His work with Men United led to an opportunity to partner with the School District of Philadelphia during the 2005-2006 school year and subsequent employment with the City of Philadelphia's Adolescence Violence Reduction Program. He's done a lot. Like I'm just taking, so I'm going to jump start because he's going to share a little bit about it on the way. He is an essayist. He's currently penning his first book in an effort to raise political consciousness of his generation. But tonight, from Toronto, he's going to be talking about a really amazing article that he wrote, and it caught my attention, and I said, okay, I got to have him chat about this. The article is White America's Dirty Secret, the Fear of Black Manhood, and Why We Lynch Bad N-Word. I don't say the N-word. He may say it tonight, but I don't say it. So welcome. How are you this evening, sir?
I'm doing well, Dr. Vibe. Thank you for the invite. I'm happy to be here on the show.
Oh, the pleasure's mine. Thank you so much for allowing me to have you on the show while you're in Toronto. You know, that is good. So what we like to do, and before we go any further also too, if anyone has any questions live, please put them in the chat room. I know our friend here tweeted it out to enough people, and I saw enough people retweeting it. So the time is now for everyone to get into it, ask questions, because we want full engagement, and that's what the Dr. Vibe show is all about. We have epic conversations because of our friends on the show, but also the friends in the audience. So can you share a little background about yourself, life growing up in Philadelphia?
Oh, man. Growing up in Philly. Well, I'm born and raised in North Philly. I actually grew up in one of the rougher areas of the, like, I don't know if you know anything about Philadelphia, but
I've been there.
Of all the big cities in the States, Philadelphia has the title of the largest poor city in the United States. I think the poverty rate is something like 25%. The population is in poverty, and then 12% of the population is what they refer to as deep poverty. So I grew up in an area of the city called the Badlands. The zip code is 19133. And just through a little project, some organizing that I was doing, I literally found out so much about the zip code that I was born and raised in that I never knew before. For instance, 19133 is currently the poorest zip code in the city of Philadelphia.
Wow.
And the life expectancy there is lower than both Syria and Iran. And in addition to that, the rate for the school to prison pipeline is the highest in the city.
Wow.
So that's, sort of the cradle that kind of like gave, birth to me, or who I am as a person, or who I am as a man currently. So yeah, born and raised in North Philly. I graduated high school in 2001. I traveled somewhat of a non-traditional path to get to where I am today. You asked about the carpentry. After I graduated high school, I didn't necessarily want to go to college, but folks were trying to push me into the school situation. So I ended up enrolling, or I think I applied to Chain University in Philadelphia, or right outside of Philadelphia. I got accepted, but I ended up getting into a little bit of trouble right after high school. So that kind of stalled my plans for college. So instead of doing the college trip at that point, I actually enrolled in a program in Philly called the Diversity Apprenticeship Program. And at the time, what it was meant to do was to train, young black males for jobs in the buildings trades, because the city was undergoing a lot of renovation, what we know as today as gentrification. So I did the program. I think it was like a year-long program. I finished it, but the program really just never panned out. I was never able to get a job inside like the carpentry unions or anything like that in the city. So I just basically did like little odds and ends jobs in the Philly area. But eventually I did get into organizing within the community. And that path, me being an organizer, has kind of like set me on the path to where I am today. I met quite a few people, and in doing that work, long story short, because I don't want to necessarily talk to the audience or whatever, but in that work, I ended up returning to school in the year 2008. I went to a community college, and I got my associate's degree in business administration. And then after I finished my associate's degree, I transferred to a four-year university, and I got a degree in business and economics. My major was accounting, and I had a minor in entrepreneurship. So right after college, I graduated in 2013. At the age of 29, I was married, had my second child at that point. So I graduated, started working with one of the big four accounting firms, became a licensed CPA. And, the rest, I guess from from professional perspective, is history. But personally, I feel like, my work has always been, since I was young, my father was very, very active and heavy in the community. I guess I was like one of the only people that I grew up with who actually had a father in the home. But he had a presence in the community. He was always trying to do something to just better the environment. And I guess that rubbed off on me. I guess that's also where I get the carpentry from, because my father would try to purchase homes and, and fix them up. And, he would try to develop a skill set. And unfortunately, I didn't see the value in it at the time, so I never really picked it up. But again, that's kind of like where I got my knack for organizing from.
Right.
And I ended up leaving my parents' home at a young age. I left around 17, and I moved out on my own. I was somewhat, rebellious. And at that point, I would say getting out into the streets or whatever, it's kind of like would set me on this alternative path that kind of like brought me to where I am today. So I think I'm kind of all over the place, but I promise you'll get more clarity from me as the conversation goes on.
No, that's good. No, that is good, and I have a good understanding on what you're sharing. Two conversation pieces come up, and depends how open you're wanting to chat. It sounds like you had a rebellious growing up phase. What was your relationship with your parents and your family at a younger age? And then part two, you said you were on a rebellious road. Do you remember when you began to turn into another direction? Was there an event or a moment that said, you know what, I got to make a turn?
Well, I think that I had a good relationship with my parents growing up, but I think the environment, that I grew up in, I think that it held a lot of sway on me as a young man. When you're young, you really just want to do the things that, your friends are doing. You want to be involved in what they're involved in, even if those things aren't necessarily, the best for you. So growing up in that environment, as much as my parents tried to kind of like, put some bumpers around me so that I could stay on the path or stay on the course, it's very easy to get sidetracked and, go down the path that is completely, different than what your parents would want for you, and, as a child, you think you know everything. So, there's that conflict because you're trying to come into your own as a young adult, and your parents are trying to push you in another way, and it ends up, driving a split between you guys. And at a point when you mature and develop as a person, you're able to come back and repair that situation. But it takes some time. And in terms of events, man, there have been numerous events that have caused me to rethink, my life. But I want to say, it was a culmination of things. But I think it started with, I experienced the loss of a lot of close friends very, very early on. I've experienced a lot of death in my life of people, of young men who were, in their teens, this is very early, like I experienced that. But I had a friend who was very close to me in 2005. I think I was 20 years old at the time. And, he had gotten murdered. And that particular murder really, it touched me a lot. I think I dealt with a lot of, emotional issues as a result of that. I dealt with a lot of depression, just a lot of darkness as a result of that situation. And I kind of teetered off even further, down the wrong route and, bumped my head quite a few times. I was getting a lot of wake-up calls that I was just ignoring them. And then I would say later in 2005, my mother at the time, she had re-enrolled in school, so she was at community college. And one of her classmates was the wife of the gentleman who was the founder of Men United for a Better Philadelphia. And he was a gentleman who had did a lot of, time in prison, probably at that point, he probably did more time in prison than I had kind of lived on this earth. And, my mother asked his wife if, he would talk to me and consider, potentially being a mentor, telling me about his experiences. And I kind of came under his wing and started to work organizing, doing some of the work that he was doing, assisting in that regard. And, I still had one foot in and one foot out. I wasn't necessarily all the way on the right track. But in about 2000, in the Philly area, around the corner from where I grew up at, I was just hanging with some friends, and somebody had tried to rob me. And that experience was the culmination of other experiences. Just led to me saying, I have to, ask who I had, brought into my network as a result of my organizing activities. And they were more than willing to kind of help me go in this different direction. But, they were adamant that I would have to do the work. So having a significant support group driving me in a different direction is really, I felt like I had a lot of people that were not necessarily looking up to me. I would be letting them down if I didn't, keep my word and do the things that, I said that I would do, which was, going back to school and really trying to, create a life my previous existence.
Okay, well, we're gonna push on through, and for people who are watching this live or on the replay, our guest is using Wi-Fi from a hotel, so if there's a little bit of challenges at times with audio, please bear with us. We're gonna do the best we can in regards to this. So, you know what? A lot of people are on right now, so we're gonna get right to the article. I was gonna ask a little bit more about your background, but I think we've got enough. Let's get right to the article. Why did you write this article at this time? What was the prompting of you to write this article?
Well, the first article that I wrote on Medium, I wrote back, and I think it was April of this year. And after there was a gentleman from Georgia, not from Georgia, from Ohio, who had shot his girlfriend, I believe, and then he shot a man on Facebook Live. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
You know, we have so many tragedies, but yeah. So around that time, you know, I was on Twitter, and there's always like kind of like the gender divide that you see, you know, on these applications, the whole black man versus black woman thing. But that day, I was just really disturbed by it because it's such a traumatic, and all the messaging that I was seeing that day was, you know, this motto, you know, black men are trash, black men are trash, and it was being repeated over and over again, and it was being repeated by black women. So that kind of spurred me to say, you know what, I'm just going to write what I feel right now. And I went and wrote an article, and I think it was called Are Straight Black Men the New Face of White Guilt? So that kind of like got me started on the writing. And I had started another article this summer. That article was called The Intersection of Trash and Canceled. And the subtext of that article was public lynchings of black men in the post-Obama era. So that article was the article that I released, but I just changed the title on it because I had sat with the article for so long in its draft form that when I got to the point where I wanted to conclude it, I felt like taking that article in a different direction. So I said, you know what, we have all this stuff going on with Kaepernick. Over the summer, you were seeing a lot of black men who, in my opinion, were cowering, weren't taking strong political or principled stances. And I wanted to speak to why that is. And I wanted to give people an understanding of that history, of the complexity of what it means to be a black man in America, in a nation that fears you. And as a result of its fear for you, it creates propaganda or a narrative around you that justifies your murder in order to keep, you know, the overall population in check, or in order to maintain the system of white supremacy. So I really wanted to flesh that out from a historical perspective to give people an understanding of how this thing started and how that relates to where we are today.
And that's one of the things I really appreciated about your article. You go back and look at a historical look and then bring us, in fact, you spend more time historically than in the present tense in regards to this article. And a lot of things that you quote, interesting enough, a lot of people aren't even aware of, black or white.
Mm-hmm.
Has history always been something of importance to you when it comes to black men?
Well, for black people in general,
right.
History has been very important to me. I would say, I guess around the age of 22, I really started to delve into a lot of reading just concerning, you know, us as a people. And there were just so many lies, you know, that we've been told, like so much that we just don't know about ourselves, that I really just kind of like dedicated myself to, you know, acquiring as much knowledge as possible, but just not for the purpose of having, you know, information, for the purpose of developing strategies that can, you know, bring unity to our community, but also for the purpose of, you know, organizing and developing a means to change the situation that we're faced with. So I would say that's, you know, where my love for history comes from, you know, and every serious figure who's ever, you know, been a part of this tradition that, you know, I consider myself to be a part of, they've always stressed the importance of history, whether it was Malcolm, whether it was Garvey, Dr. Clark, you know, Dr. Amos Wilson, like it doesn't matter. Like without pause, every person who's a part of this, what I refer to as, you know, African nationalist tradition, all stress the importance of history, you know, so I think that's where my love of history comes from.
You had mentioned your father at the beginning of our conversation. Was that something that he also provided an environment for you in regards to appreciating Black history?
My father, I think that what he instilled in me was to be curious, to be principled, to be true to myself, but also to question and be skeptical. And what I mean by that is, you know, growing up, early on in life, I grew up in a very strict and religious household. But that was up until about the age of 10. And at that point, my father was like, you know what? There are just some things here that don't gel with me. Um, I don't necessarily know if this is the right decision, but I don't want my kids to grow up indoctrinated into a way of thinking that essentially cripples them in life. So I'm going to remove them from this strict religious environment and let them find their own way. So I think that, that was the gift that my father gave to me, because being removed from an environment that is very strict, and then basically, I don't want to say thrown into a den of wolves, but in the community that I grew up in, there's, a lot of things that could go wrong, in your life, and it could happen really quick. But I have always been inquisitive and, and on a search, to gain knowledge, So at one point in my life, I had taken my Shahada, and I was practicing Islam. And then after that, I was learning just more traditional, spirituality. Well, not traditional, because I don't even know if traditional is the word, but, right now and at this point in my life, I'm really moving back towards, African spirituality. I haven't, been initiated or anything at this point, but I feel as though that's kind of like where I'm being led from a spiritual perspective. So, and then that's another thing. I think my father gave me a strong sense of spirituality as a person. So,
with all the research that you did in this article, especially historical wise, was there any things that really stood out to you or caught you by surprise, or that you didn't know?
I don't necessarily think that there was anything that stood out by surprise. Like, a lot of the information I already knew, but I knew that it needed to be presented with credible sources. So, we have Google now, and you can do a great deal of research to pull in sources that will confirm an argument. I think I'm working to flesh the sand personality or the slave personality. What I came to the conclusion of, and I didn't necessarily put this into writing because I didn't think it would fit in, but although the Sambo is the face of the black man's face of cooperative submission, it's also a caricature of the white psyche or the white imagination. And what I mean by that is Sambo is necessary for the white man for the sake that slavery removed the humanity from black men, or that was the goal of slavery, to strip the humanity from black men and basically turn them into, no different than an animal, a pig or an ox. But the thing is, you cannot do that to another human being without also removing your humanity. So the white man needed Sambo to survive the slave experience just as much as the black man needed Sambo to survive the slave experience, because the white man needed to believe that his own humanity remained in check. So in order to do that, he needed to believe that slavery was this benign institution, and whenever the black man smiled and was shucking and jiving, that was confirmation to the white man that, what, this thing really isn't that bad, because look at this Negro. He's happy to be in this condition. So that allowed the white man to say, what, I'm doing a really good thing here. I'm civilizing him and giving him culture and religion. So I don't know if I'm breaking up or not, but let me know if you need me to repeat anything.
No, your audio is good. Your audio is good. We're getting through. We're taking it inch by inch, so your audio is good. So we're just going to keep on going like that. This is good conversation we're having here, an important conversation we're having here. Another part of the piece, and it's a conversation topic that comes out a lot on my platform, is a whole area of black males and emasculation. And you go deep into it in your article. Share what your thoughts are historically and also currently about black men and emasculation.
Well, historically speaking, black manhood has always been a threat to the status quo. I like to say that, it's not possible to be both an African and a slave at the same time. Like, you're either one or the other. So being an African, I say, you still have your manhood because you still have your sense of self, and you are willing to die in order to keep that. And I think that we saw that, when the Europeans got to the continent, and tried to kidnap, Africans. The Africans fought. When they got us on the ships, we fought. When they got us here, we fought. We continued to fight until they were able to strip us of our manhood. And that project was something that they did through psychological trauma and terror, that escapes many of the history books. So a lot of people don't know. So there's the one scene that I put in there, from the transatlantic slave trade, that is, I would want to say, indicative of a lot of the information that's removed from the history books. And it's the scene of the rebellious slave, or I don't want to say slave, of the rebellious African, or the captive African, who was organizing a rebellion on the ship. And when the captain got wind that he was organizing a rebellion, he murdered him. And I think he either cut out his heart or cut out his liver and chopped it into 300 pieces and forced all the other, captives to eat it. And, that was a sign to say, hey, like, I have power or domination over you. And if you do not do what I tell you to do, a similar fate will await you. So in that regard, the black man has never been allowed to reach maturity as a man, or develop as a man. There's one point in there where I say that the underdeveloped black men to the point of puerility. And what that essentially means is, like, it underdeveloped us to a point of like a childlike, immature infant state where we're completely dependent on our father and his mercy for our livelihood. And if you juxtapose the black man to the black woman during the slave experience, I think the black woman had a wider range of development. And what do I mean by that? Well, the black woman was responsible for raising the white woman's child. So this child who's 1, 2, and 3 years old is going to grow up to be an adult. But Mammy, was the one who was, almost served as parent to that child. So there's somewhat of a reverence or a respect between, the black woman and the white child who grows up to be the white adult who assumes the role of slave master. Then the black man, on the other hand, that same 3 or 4 year old child is playing with this grown black man as if they are equals. The black man is, dancing and skipping and making the child laugh, and the child grows, but the child never has any reverence or respect the way that he has for the black woman. That's not given to the black man, because the black man's place is that of a child, right? And any show of manhood or making a principled stand within that condition, it'll cost you your life. In the slave narratives, Frederick Douglass talks about the conflict that he had with his owner. And he said, at that point when he fought him back and got the best of him, that spirit of manhood was kind of like reborn, in his body. And that's not to say that manhood is associated with violence or aggression, but it is associated with the will to do what's necessary to stake claim to your God-given rights as a human being. So I think that is denied black men, and if black men ever have a desire to pick that up, I think that there's a serious price for a desire to be a man, under the system of white supremacy.
What are some examples that concern you today when it comes to the area of black men and masculinity in current day America?
Oh man, I think in current day America, I think that we are in the worst condition that we've ever been as black men. One of the people who gets discredited quite often is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and the reason she gets discredited is because the homosexual community has a very powerful lobby So some of the questions that she's asking pose a lot of problems for that community. But one of the points that she raised was that not just homosexuality, but effeminate men, or effeminate men is almost it's a maladaptation to your oppression as a man. I talked about in the article how there are different typecasts or personalities that black men developed to survive the slave experience. One of them was, Nat, and these typecasts and personalities were from the white man's perspective, right? These were personalities that were developed by plantation owners, or that were documented by plantation owners. But we had Nat, who's like reference to Nat Turner. We had the trickster, who's like, the guy who's just always trying to get over on you, like outsmart the master. You had the conjurer, who they would say is like the root person, who's, always saying, that the world is going to come to an end, or, fire is going to rain down on this place. And you had Sambo, who was the guy who was just cooperative. But these new personalities that we have today, when you see a lot of these effeminate black men who are outwardly, putting on shows of feminine characteristics, I think that Dr. Frances Cress Welsing spoke. I think she spoke brilliantly on that, because there's like, you get all this messaging. You receive messaging from many different inputs, right? And we know that behavior is modified through rewards and punishments. So if I am going to punish you whenever you have a certain characteristic or trait, but I'll reward you, if you become, carefree, very effeminate, very unprincipled, I'll reward you for those things, then, psychologically or even subconsciously, you'll see black men start to pick up and move to those traits, because at the end of the day, black men just have a desire to survive. I think that black men are terrorized in the Western world, and people don't really understand our terror or our plight. And it's like, when I see these certain behaviors, I see it as a cry for help, because we truly do fear death. Imagine seeing yourself just, murdered over and over on the newsreel, and knowing that could be you at any moment. In that regard, you'll do whatever it takes to survive. So if that means, it could mean a lot of things, but I think that's a result of kind of like where we are. I don't know if I answered your question.
No,
there's probably some other points I can add in there, but
that I think is very important what you're sharing, and there are a number of people watching live, and we appreciate that. Then, what are your thoughts on black manhood? Like, actually, with the research that you've done, has there been any time that's been the best for black manhood in your thought process? Because you're saying right now it isn't the best at times. Was it better in the past? Or has it basically been the same, just different surroundings and different environments?
Dr. John Henry Clark says that the 19th century probably produced the strongest crop of Africans that we've ever seen in the Western world. But at the same time, people from the African-centered tradition will also reinforce that this current generation is the best generation that we've yet to produce. But in looking back to that period of Reconstruction, to that point of emancipation and even late slavery, I feel like black men were really standing up and putting cracks in the system of white supremacy, meaning like we were hitting back. The Haitians got their independence in 1804, which is the start of the 19th century. You had the Nat Turner rebellions in I think it was 1832 or 1831. But all throughout that period, the 19th century, like black men were really just hitting back. And we were fighting back so much that it changed the discussion preemptively to the point that, the white race had to say, what are we going to do about this slave situation? And I wrote another article. The article is called blue check Negroes in the nuclear family. And in that article, I'm talking about those discussions where, you know, the economic system was changing in America, and you had this problem when you had this overabundance of physical labor that was no longer needed, which posed a problem of population. You know, what do you do with all these black bodies laying around? Like, how do we, not laying around, but that we have here, right? So like I'm an accountant. You know, when you have an asset on the books, you know, you depreciate that asset over time, and at a point in time, you remove that asset from the books. Like right now in America, the black man represents a fully depreciated asset, you know, and America is initiating the process of removing us from their books.
Let me just interrupt you there. Why do you term the black man as a fully depreciated asset?
Because in terms of economic iterations, we've had four since we've been in the Western world. We went from agriculture to industrialization to automation to where we currently are, which they refer to as the fourth industrial revolution, which is artificial intelligence and you know, cyborgs, a lot of crazy stuff, and automation as well. But you know, in the 30s, Carter G. Woodson was talking about, you know, machines essentially removing the demand for black labor. You know, in 1964, there was an article written by an economist called "Who Needs the Negro," where they were talking about this was 64, and they were saying that having the surplus of bodies, and the fact is our values inhibit genocide. So knowing that we got these surplus of bodies and we don't have anything to do with them, you either kill them or you warehouse them. But where we are right now, we're at a point where we're moving to a point where labor is no longer needed. You hear a lot of people arguing for a universal basic income because there's nothing out there for you to do to necessarily make a living. So you have all these additional bodies, you know, what Hitler would refer to as useless eaters that are kind of like here, you know, taking up space. And we're trying to create this new society, but this new society, or this postmodern society, it calls for a drastic decrease in the current population. And where are they going to get those numbers from? Well, those numbers are going to come largely from the black race. So the black man is going to take a significant hit, but the other hit is going to come to the womb of the black woman, which is where you see, you know, like Bill Gates and folks like that on the African continent doing all that they can to make sure that the black woman does not continue to produce black men. You know, Dr. Tommy Curry has, I haven't completed his book, but I heard an interview of his where he was basically explaining how the black woman's womb is considered crimogenic, because the black woman's womb produces these black men that society doesn't want. So not only do we have to, you know, put a halt to her womb and her ability to reproduce, we also have to, you know, purge this black man from our books. And I think that that's kind of like what we see happening right now. But I feel like it's going to be turned up to a level that we haven't seen before, and it's unfortunate because I don't think that we're prepared for that.
Mm. In regards to the state of the black man in America and maybe North America, maybe around the world, do you fear there's any fear in the black community of black manhood?
I don't think that we know what black manhood is.
Okay.
Because black men have not been allowed to fully develop. What we see, you know, a lot of the critiques that we are making of black men right now, we're making critiques of an undeveloped man was kept emotionally and mentally suppressed by a society that fears him. So we don't understand black manhood, you know. So a lot of the discussions that we have around black manhood are discussions that essentially just pathologize Black men. You know, manhood is something that is honed via culture, right? Your culture teaches you what you need to be in order for your survival. But Black people's culture has been subordinated to Western culture, right? And Western culture, its only desire for Black men is for us to get off the earth. So if that is the desired intent of the culture, of the cultural incubator that houses us, we'll never be able to see what manhood truly is, because I think manhood has to be born from within, because what we see in white men is not the definition, nor is it the standard for manhood. You know, I think that we have to look historically at the relationship that we've had with Black women to understand what and who we need to be as Black men.
So let's drill down a little bit deeper here now, because do you feel that you were given good manhood mentorship or in an environment of manhood when you were growing up with your father?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like I would say that being a man now myself, like I have tremendous respect for my father, right? Because, you know, for him, you know, taking care of 5 children, you know, and a wife, and really just, you know, my father was always, as best as he knew, just trying to drop gems on, you can just keep principles of life, what you need to be a person of character, just being principled, being a man of your word, looking the man in your eyes, if, letting your word be your bond, just like a lot of like lessons, learned about I guess like the intangible factors of what it means to be a man. I think the areas where my father may have fell short, I think that they speak more to the culture that produced him than they speak to him, as a man. I think that given his understanding and his level of knowledge, I think that he was phenomenal as a man. But again, we're going through this process of remaking or rebirthing ourselves. So it's going to take, some work for us to get back to ideal manhood. But I don't believe that we can reach that place within a system of white supremacy that fears Black manhood. So for me, I guess that's perplexing, but I guess it points to only one conclusion, and that conclusion is that your work as a man, first and foremost, has to be about family, and about working with a Black woman to build Black family. But more importantly, it has to be about working with that Black woman to make sure that white supremacy is not here to rule over your child. So what I'm really trying to say is, as a Black man, one of our key roles in this world today is the overthrow of the system of white supremacy. And I think if you are not about that work, then you're not serious about the survival and the ultimate, and ultimately, what's best for your people globally.
So let me ask, and Tachi, one of the great followers of the Dr. Vibe show, and she does a great show on media and pop culture on Periscope, 6 p.m. Periscope and Facebook Live on 6 p.m. on Wednesday evenings. Tachi, you put something in the comments. Can you just tell me the question that you want our friend to answer? But I'm going to get to another question here. You're talking about white supremacy. Do you feel that Black men, the Black community, is equipped to defeat white supremacy? And is it a battle that they can win on their own, or will they need the help of other cultures to defeat white supremacy?
A battle that you win with arms that are not your own is a win that cannot be sustained.
Did I break up there, or did you catch me what I just
Yeah,
said?
could you just repeat that? You broke up there at the beginning of your response. Okay, it seems that we've lost Mr. Africa on in regards. Hold on.
All right.
Okay. Okay, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Did you hear what I last said?
No, unfortunately, no, no. But I'm gonna. Okay, yeah. We didn't hear what you had to say. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, you asked if I think that win can be won on our own, or we need to do that with other cultures.
Right. And what are your thoughts?
I don't believe in racial alliances that white supremacy have to do on our own. And one of the things that we have to understand is that white supremacy is a house of cards. The way that it's maintained through fear, through terror, through murder. But understanding that, I believe that the only way for us to come up out of this situation is through the practice of nationalism, through seeing ourselves as a collective body and understanding that we have a national entity, several national entities that oppose us being any place socially than where we currently are, which is at the bottom. And understanding that, you get I think it's a lot deeper. There's much more for me to flesh out. For the sake of brevity, I guess the short answer is this is something that has to be done on our own. This is not something that we can do collectively with other people.
Okay, Tachi has followed up with me, and she's saying here we are talking about the causes, which is important, but how do we begin to solve this in a concrete way? So I'm gonna frame what she has to say, and how can Black manhood what are some of the ways that you feel Black manhood can get to where it needs to be?
I don't think that we can accomplish anything outside organizations. I think that the best ideas that we have concerning not just Black manhood, but concerning Black or African people, I think that those ideas have to be institutionalized in order to reproduce a group of men that are representative of Black manhood. And essentially what I mean by that is, I consider us to be a degenerate people right now. And degenerate, I'm speaking spiritually. I mean, I consider us to be spiritually dead, like a dead body. Regenerate us is that light which comes in the form of knowledge, of knowing what it means to be a Black man, of knowing what it means to relate to a Black woman.
So let me interrupt you. What, in your opinion, does it mean to be a Black man?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think, wow. I think that oftentimes Black men are reduced to these one-dimensional beings that lack complexity. And our counterpart, Black women, are always given, they always are seen with multi-dimensions. If you think about everything that is good about a Black woman, whether you talk about, the Black woman being, the mother of civilization, her being nurturing, her being loving, her being whatever a nation needs her to be in order for that nation to survive and thrive. I think that a Black man is equally that. You know, I think that we are her opposite, not opposite. Like that, I think the phrase is opposite or oppositional unity, meaning kind of like that yin and yang. Like everything that she is, we complete her, and everything that we are, um, and everything that we are, everything that she is completes us, and everything that we are completes her. So I feel what it means to be a black man. If you look at the good traits that are in a black woman, I think that those traits should also be seen within a black man. But I think that they need to work in unison so that there's balance between like that masculine and that feminine. I think I don't think that I'm giving as much clarity as I would like to. But basically, you know, what I'm trying to point to is that, you know, ultimately being a black man means just balance, you know, living a life that is aligned, not to get all spiritual or anything, but living a life that is aligned with the cosmos, you know, and I think that when you are aligned, you know, with the universe, then you'll find not just alignment with yourself, you'll find alignment with your, you know, your spiritual partner or your black woman as well. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the best answer that I can give at this moment.
All right. So, as we wind down our conversation, what does the black man need to work on?
That's a good question. What do we need to work on? We need to work on ourselves, first and foremost, man. We have a lot. We have a lot of unpacked, you know, emotional and mental, you know, baggage that we've, you know, carried with us for a long time. So I think that black men need a space where they can, you know, learn to communicate and discuss these things so that, you know, they can grow and develop. So I think that first and foremost, we need to work on ourselves. But after that, I think that we need to work on our relationship with black women. And I think that a significant part of that work is going to be our ability to really, you know, listen to our women and see, you know, what it is that she has to say or what she is trying to say. Because I believe that there's a lot of validity in a lot of the arguments that I hear from black women. I think that ultimately what the black woman feels for black men is a sense of betrayal. And I think that that sense of betrayal kind of shapes the lens or the medium through which she expresses her views for us. But ultimately, I think a lot of the conflict that you see between the black man and the black woman is agitated and instigated by those outside of the community and those within the community that have been educated by those outside of the community. So, you know, I think that that's kind of like the second part. First part is working on self. The second part is working on the relationship with the woman. And then the third part is, you know, kind of like reclaiming or re-entering that position of fatherhood within our community. You know what I mean? Because a lot of our children are growing up fatherless, where black men are not playing the role that we should necessarily be playing. But I think that is the third and kind of like final phase in terms of things that we need to work on. You know, it's for me, it's really all about us, because I'm not necessarily concerned with tearing down a system of white supremacy. What I'm really concerned with is building up black people, because the system of white supremacy is built on our backs. You know, so we stand up and start to build our own, and then, you know, that system goes away. But we just have to understand that we can't do anything unless we're doing it collectively.
There's an interesting comment here by, I think it's Think TV. She's saying, once the black man is black first, all our problems will fall.
Meaning once we're operating based upon, you know, a race first mindset.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a key prerequisite to the work that we have to do. Like Du Bois used to talk about having a double consciousness, meaning, seeing yourself through the lens of your oppressor. Until you have a single consciousness, which is totally black, everything that you do, you're just going to be shooting yourself in the foot because you don't have the clarity and focus that is necessary to get the job done. But when you're operating based upon the principles or philosophies of race first, then that gives you a measure by which you measure all your actions. You know what I mean? So, being race first, how does this action benefit my race? And that means every action. What I'm doing here, is it helping or is it harming? And if that's the metric by how you measure every interaction that you have, that's a metric that's going to ultimately point you to success.
What has been the reaction to this article?
For the most part, it's been all positive. People have been very thankful for me writing it. People have said that they've learned a lot. They appreciate the historical comparison. I only got one negative reaction, and ironically enough, it was from a black woman, and she said she felt as though the article was excusing black men and not allowing black men to take accountability for the fact that they are, I guess, oppressors, or are victimizing people as well and subjecting people as well. So that was like the only negative argument that I got, or negative response that I got. But for the most part, they've all been positive.
Just following up on that lady's comment, do you feel in any way black men are oppressors?
No, no, I don't. I think that is rhetoric that, there's a very politicized, gender studies and women's studies that you see on the college campus that has, as its undergirding philosophy, this thing of postmodernism. I'm writing a piece on this right now. So the next piece that I write on this is going to be discussing, I think it's the subtext is, the road to liberation is paved with black male bodies. And I'm basically talking about how black male bodies have been thrown under a bus that's being fueled by their death. And I'm really going into detail to give people an understanding of where this whole concept of black men being oppressors comes from, and what it's meant to create. It's like, Saul Alinsky, right? You gotta create a devil or an opponent by which you can build unity for your group. And if my group is this group of all black women, the only thing that gives us the momentum, the group morale that we need is to have an enemy. And the natural enemy, well, not the natural enemy, but the easy enemy is to point to the enemy right next to you. And any energy that you throw out against black men really only serves to bring that collective of black women who feel that way, to help them build a tighter bond. But I'm really going to be speaking to a lot of that, like in this next article that I'm writing. And again, I'll be providing an historical analysis to give people an understanding of, what this thing is all about. But no, black men are not oppressors. I think that it's sad that sisters in our community have that perspective of black men.
Okay, so Dr. Tachi is saying, so are you saying that black men are not oppressive?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, that black men are not oppressive.
Okay.
I think that black men being underdeveloped, I think that we do harm within our community. If you look at the rates of violence between black men and other black men, I think that you'll see that, when you can compare those rates to other, communities, you'll see that those, that's off the charts. But when also we look at the rates of violence against black men against black women, you'll see that those rates are off the charts. But when you control that population for elements of class, a few other factors, you see that those numbers kind of drop off. So a lot of what you see are environmental factors, and we are essentially pathologizing. I can't even say the word correctly. We're essentially.
Had a long day. You've had a long day.
Yeah, I have. I've been up since 5 a.m. But we are essentially criminalizing black men for the kind of like social engineering that created their reality. Now, this is not me necessarily excusing black men, but what I'm saying is we can't ignore the environmental factors, and I guess this goes back to being race first. Like, those environmental factors are things that are created in order to foster the situation that we currently have in our community. So I don't believe that black men are oppressors, or oppressive.
Well, here there's an interesting conversation brewing here, and of course, the fact is we're beginning to wind it down, but there's now a conversation going on in the comments section. Think TV says some black men are oppressive to black women. That's very naive for you to say. And then Paul Johnson is saying black men don't have the power to oppress anybody. So two different thought process. Do you want to make a comment on either one at all?
Yeah, I don't. My comment is simply, I don't understand how, when we are talking oppression, when it comes to oppression, that comes from the white community, that oppression is spoken of in regards of systems and institutions and practices where our whole situation, it relates to like a power dynamic. But when it comes to black men and interpersonal relationships, like, we are creating interpersonal, one-on-one conflicts. We are equating those to the sameness of the same oppression that you were saying that the white community is given to our race or whatever. Like, that's just logic that I don't agree with. But I understand like the agenda, behind that logic, but I don't necessarily agree with it. I think I'll do a better job of kind of tackling it, through my writing, so.
Well, it's interesting. Dr. Tachi is saying, I think you should ask black women that. I don't think that you can speak for black women. Then Paul Johnson saying, how black women have access to the things black men don't and can't get access to. Then Think TV is saying, I'm not referring to institutional oppression. Domestic oppression can be just as damaging. And she also said that, yeah, she does feel that some black men are oppressive to black women, and not necessarily referring to regards to institutional. The conversation is heating up and we're winding down here. Dr. Tachi is saying black men can absolutely be oppressive regardless of condition. No one is likening it to white oppression.
Yeah. I appreciate, her sentiment. Like I said, I don't agree with it. She's a doctor. There are some doctors who I think are a lot more qualified than I am to speak on this. Like me, I'm an essayist, right? I look at the situation, in our community, and I use a lot of history, analogies and examples to tell a story. And I tell that story with the desire to motivate people in our community to make change and to work together collectively to change our situation. But there are doctors, like, I don't know if she's familiar with Dr. Tommy Curry or Dr.
I am familiar with Dr. Curry. I've had him on my platform a number of times. The book, the book, The Man Not.
Yeah, I think they make brilliant academic and scholarly arguments that completely debunk, that myth of black male oppression. So I would love to see, intersectional theorists engage in that level of debate, at the collegiate level, or at the academic level with somebody like a Dr. Tommy Curry or Dr. T. Hassan Johnson. But what we've seen, or at least what it looks like from the outside, is people tend to avoid their writings because they don't want to engage them, because I feel like it'll poke way too many holes in their argument. So people are hoping that if they don't shine any light on those arguments, then those arguments will go away.
Okay, I'm just keeping up with the comments here because it's getting very, very good. Commentary is going on. Sarita Douglas, long time no see or hear from Ms. Douglas. Thanks so much for joining us. She's saying, if you are a black man and you want to control where your woman goes, who her friends are, and who she talks to, you are oppressive. And there are lots of black men like that. Then Paul Johnson says, but why was there an article saying that black men are the white men of the community? That's a whole other article in itself. And Think TV is saying black men are not the white men of black people. Dr. Tachi says yes. Paul Johnson is saying a black woman can get rid of black men as simple as a phone call to the police. KOS1 is saying, let's all stay on code. We can't fight each other and the system. Okay, so that is thank you everyone who's coming in. It sounds like I'm going to have to do host an epic conversation about black men and oppression, or black internal, or black community and internal oppression, because it sounds like there is differing comments here on our conversation tonight about black men. And maybe I should ask a question, maybe host a conversation. Can black men be oppressive? Are people wanting me to host that conversation? And what I'll try to do is I'll see if I can get Dr. Tommy Curry to be on that conversation with me again. Dr. Curry is someone I very much respect. Indeed. Okay. Sarita Douglas is saying indeed. So I'm going to put that down as homework to see if I can get oppression and black men, internal, external, etc. I will see if we can get Paul. That's falling into, yeah, it's different kinds of oppression.
And can you do me a favor? Let the sister Sharita Douglas know that I don't. She obviously can hear. I can't see her, but if you're a black woman, like, I absolutely consider you my sister, right? I don't really like to engage in conflict, between black men and black women. I'm always willing to sit down and listen, but the problem is, I feel like a lot of our sisters that are educated or have kind of like that intersectional framework, they approach the conversation from the point of moral authority, and the conversation becomes a very dogmatic conversation, whereas though it's not one where we're looking to repair or improve the relationship or develop an understanding of our different perspectives. It's one where there's like a zero-sum game. Like, your goal is to, I'm not saying you personally, but the goal becomes for someone to be the loser in the conversation. So one of the perspectives to outlast the other, and that's really not like what I'm into. Like, I really am into working with black women and to listening to the things that black women say. I just don't. Whenever I hear like that intersectional framework being used to make arguments that frame black men as oppressors or terrorists or trash or whatever, I kind of like reject those sentiments because I understand the underlying spirit of those arguments.
On that note, we're going to let you go get some sleep.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
No problem. Go ahead.
No, I enjoyed being on the show. I think that this was great. I really do. And I'm looking forward to sharing more of my writing. And I'm glad there was such an interest, in this last piece. I do encourage anyone who's listening, if they have not read the article, it's pinned to my profile on Twitter. Please go check it out. Feel free to engage with me. I don't want to argue, but I would love to engage and just hear different perspectives. So definitely check the article out if you haven't done so already.
Well, what I'm doing right now for people who are on live, I've just put the link to the article in the comment section. Mr. Afrika, thank you so much for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule. You're not even at home. You're in Toronto on work. in regards to this. And in regards, I'd like to say, before we let you go, I'd like to say thank you to a number of people tonight. Of course, a regular Dr. Tachi, thank you so much. Think TV, thank you so much. Let me see if I can pronounce. I can't. I can't pronounce this name, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce this. Agavra. That's it. Agruvra. That was on. Paul Johnson, thank you so much. Sarita Douglas, thank you so much. KOS1, thank you so much for making the conversation epic. Thank you and good night. I will read the, okay, well, Think TV is going to read the article. So, and Think TV, if you have any comments about it, certainly touch base with our guest, our friend tonight, about the article via Twitter, etc. So, if they want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
You can get a hold of me on Twitter. I'm at Omowale Afrika. On Twitter, that's the handle. That's pretty much the only social media app that I currently use.
Okay.
But you can, I'm always on Medium, I'm writing, but, if you want to just engage with me in real time, just check with me on Twitter.
Excellent. Well, it is Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. I'm also a certified empowerment coach, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communication. If you want to catch replays of my audio epic conversations, you can catch them at thedrvibeshow.com, which is THEDRVIBESHOW. Also at Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Tuned In Radio, Stitcher Radio. Selected replays are also available at thegoodmanproject.com and also at wjmsradio.com. You can also catch the replays of my YouTube conversations like this one right here at the Dr. Vibe Show site on YouTube. I have about 260 subscribers, and if it's in your heart to subscribe, we'd love you to subscribe. Also, I'm a brand ambassador for the only online site that's dedicated to African Americans in food, wine, and travel. That's cuisinenoirmagazine.com. And also, I had mentioned I'm a certified empowerment coach. If you'd like a complimentary 30-minute empowerment session, please reach out to me on Twitter at drvibeshow, email address dr.vibe at thedrvibeshow.com, or you can go to my website address thedrvibeshow.com and click on the link to the contact page. I'd like to thank everyone who stopped by, and also to Sarita Douglas. It's been too long. Thank you so much. Now, 3 last things I'd like to say. First, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Also, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. And finally, God bless, peace to well, keep the faith, and we will catch you soon. Thanks for everyone who stopped by tonight, and I will reach out to Dr. Tommy Khairi to see if he'll come on again on my platform to talk about can black men oppressors or oppressed? That will be the title of the conversation. So thanks so much for stopping by. We will catch you soon. God bless. Good night.